Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, November 4th, 2021. Private employer COVID-19 vaccine mandate is formally published. It'll take effect in January and cover all companies with 100 or more employees. An estimated 84 million workers, two-thirds of the U.S. private sector workforce. We'll have reaction from all sides coming up. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi asked about the timeline for getting the two big budget bills voted on in the House, the infrastructure and social spending and tax bill. No firm decisions announced, though. Virginia's Republican Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin has lunch with the current governor, Democrat Ralph Northam, at the governor's mansion in Richmond to talk about the transition of administrations. And a federal judge hears arguments over former President Donald Trump's attempt to claim executive privilege to keep records from his White House out of the hands of members of Congress investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Reports are the judge is skeptical that a former president can assert executive privilege. We'll talk about it with a reporter from Politico. Tens of millions of Americans who work at companies with 100 or more employees will need to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 by January 4th or get tested for the virus weekly under government rules issued Thursday. That from the Associated Press. The article goes on, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration regulations will force the companies to require that unvaccinated workers test negative for COVID-19 at least once a week and wear a mask while in the workplace. Workers will be able to ask for exemptions on medical or religious grounds. Dr. Rochelle Walensky, as director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, asked today by Senator Patty Murray, chair of the Health Committee, about this mandate and why it's needed.
This morning, OSHA released an emergency temporary standard to protect workers against COVID-19. This is a critical step to reducing workplace transmission and making workplaces safer nationwide, especially for our frontline workers who are at high risk of COVID-19. Can you just speak to us from a public health perspective about the urgent need to get more Americans vaccinated and the importance of implementing measures to protect people from infection in higher risk settings like our workplaces?
Yeah, thank you so much. We've had 745,000 deaths from this disease, and we're continuing to have about 75,000 cases every single day. We know the most disruptive thing in a workforce is to have a COVID outbreak and to have workers in that workforce come down with COVID infection, severe disease, and in some cases, death. Vaccination, as we have seen, decreases your risk of infection by 6-fold, decreases your risk of hospitalization and death by 10-fold, even during this Delta surge. So there is absolutely a public health priority to get people vaccinated and to continue the important prevention and mitigation strategies, including masking, to keep them safe. Thank you.
CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky before the Senate Health Committee. Questions from the chair, Patty Murray, Democrat from Washington State. The OSHA rule from today does not apply to people who work remotely in the private sector. Businesses will be required to give paid time off for workers to get vaccinated and recover from any side effects. Businesses also not required to pay for the testing or provide face coverings unless state or local laws or labor union contracts say they must. Also today, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services at the Health and Human Services Department requiring health care workers at facilities participating in Medicare and Medicaid to be fully vaccinated by January 4th. That's more than 17 million workers at about 76,000 health care facilities. Governor of Florida Ron DeSantis, a Republican, announcing he'll be joining a lawsuit with Georgia and Alabama challenging the Biden administration's COVID-19 vaccine mandates, arguing the federal government does not have the power to issue or enforce them. At the White House today, the Principal Deputy Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre asked for a response.
How confident is the White House these will hold up in court with a lot of GOP states threatening legal action?
So we're pretty confident. The administration clearly has the authority to protect workers, and actions announced by the president are designed to save lives and stop spread of COVID. DOJ will be defining these laws. This is a once-in-a-generation pandemic. As we know, it's taken more than 740,000 lives, and that's what we're trying to do here in this administration. We're trying to save lives. But I do want to, since you brought up the GOP, I do want to take a step back for a second and just as I mentioned, that we have the legal authority, and as I mentioned, over 740,000 Americans have died. People are sitting out of the workforce because of COVID concerns, right? The worst disruption businesses have faced for nearly 2 years is their employees getting sick with COVID. At the same time, we have tools at our disposal we know work. So these policies work. Boost vaccination rates, as we have seen, in short, and they protect workers and they save Americans' lives. So, the question that we always have and that we ask to the Republicans is, why are they getting in the way? Why are they getting in the way of trying to protect and save lives? That's all we're trying to do. And so we have an authority to do that. That was the OSHA, that was given to OSHA, to a congressional authority to get that done, to make sure that we make sure that employees are not in danger. They're not in grave danger. So this is the direction that we're going, because, again, this is about putting the pandemic behind us, making sure that we continue to protect the lives of workers and to protect the lives of Americans.
Karine Jean-Pierre is the principal deputy White House press secretary, briefing reporters in the White House briefing room. In anticipation of today's formal release of the OSHA private sector COVID-19 vaccine mandate, virtually all Senate Republicans indicating they will be pressing for a vote to overturn the regulation. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, part of a news conference on Wednesday.
He literally reached into every company and said, I don't care how you run your company. His statement was, I'm the President of the United States. I'm now going to tell your company what to do. It has caused chaos across the country and across our economy, and it's because a tremendous amount of frustration in a lot of families and employers in my state, in Oklahoma. Listen, the vast majority of the people in my state have been vaccinated. They've chosen to do that. I've been vaccinated. But the vast majority of the people that have been vaccinated also say that was a personal choice that I made. I want others to have the same ability to have the same choice that I made in their life as well. We've got 40+ million people that have already had COVID and have recovered. They have natural immunity. We have people that are in cancer treatments and other things that are saying this is not right. I have a friend of mine that his son has had long-term COVID, and after months and months and months of a very difficult, long recovery, is now on the other side of it. And now his employer is saying, if you want to stay employed, you need to have this vaccine. And he has no idea how his body's going to react to this. He literally has to choose between his own doctor telling him don't do this or keeping his job, because President Biden has determined he's going to be the nation's dad and he's going to tell everyone what they have to do. That's not who we are as a country. That's not how we should operate. That's not the job of the president, is to go instruct everyone.
Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. And with more on this private sector COVID-19 vaccine mandate, we're joined by Ashley Heather, co-founder and president of Cleared4, a health platform that provides vaccine verification and related services to companies and organizations. Thanks so much for doing this. If you are a business owner and you've heard now about this mandate, what do you do?
That's a great question. We've actually been working for months and months now with hundreds of businesses trying to get prepared for this mandate. But the good news is, for those people that haven't quite got there, there is still time. I think obviously the first thing to do is make yourself familiar with the rules. They're well publicized now as of today on what has to happen. So the company is over 100 employees by January 4th. Essentially have to ensure their staff who are coming to an office are vaccinated, or if not vaccinated, tested weekly. So those are the most important two pieces of it. So if you're an organization that is not currently tracking who is and who isn't vaccinated, that is something you have to start doing and thinking about how you're going to collect and store that information safely and securely. Obviously, it's medical information, so it's sensitive data and has to be stored in a kind of special, we call it HIPAA-compliant manner. And then for those people that are exempt but still coming to the office, they have to be tested. There are different types of COVID tests. Generally, a PCR test is the highest quality. We've been PCR testing hundreds of thousands of our clients, employers, and students over the last months, again, getting ready for this. So you need to find a testing partner in your local area and roll out a testing plan. The good news is that Cleared4 was designed to do all of this, and that's exactly what we're doing from leading colleges in New York like CUNY, where we have 300,000 students being tested or showing their vaccination proof. Corporations like Netflix are all doing this already, have all got prepared, and by using the Cleared For platform, already automatically meet all the new mandates that have come out. So there is still time to act. Obviously, there's not a lot of time, but we can deploy our platform, and obviously there are others in the market too, in a few days, as little as a few days. So it's about just picking up the phone, picking up the email, getting prepared, and deploying a platform like ours to track and have all the information available if OSHA comes knocking on the door, which it sounds like from the latest releases they're going to do, with some big fines, some hefty fines for companies who aren't following through with the policies.
Well, on enforcement, you've got millions of employees being covered by this, thousands of companies. Can OSHA really enforce this effectively?
Well, I think they're going to do the best job that they can with the resources that they have. I don't work for OSHA, but I can imagine their leadership is in control of the situation. They know who these companies are. They connect with these companies for other reasons outside of COVID, and they'll use those communication channels to check in and do spot checking. I'm sure you'll start reading about some of these hefty fines as a sort of carrot and stick approach. I think up to 14,000 per event, so that could be hundreds of thousands for larger corporations with multiple offices. So I think the news of the fines will start motivating organizations. And then I think, as we've seen, many leaders of these companies, CEOs and school administration leadership, have been very proactive and have been preparing for this and getting ready for it. Obviously, there are a number of companies who haven't quite got there yet. Maybe they didn't think the mandates would truly be enforced or legislation wouldn't be put through, and maybe they're scrambling a little now. But we're here to help all organizations get prepared, and I think enforcement will happen, and it's just the right thing to do to abide by the new mandates.
When Congress was debating COVID economic aid bills earlier this year, the question of legal liability for businesses, and Republicans wanted protection for those businesses, came up. And that issue's faded a bit in recent months, but now with this mandate, is it something that companies need to think about? They can't control what Congress might do, but they might ask for it.
Yeah, I think so. There's two sides to it. There's both the cost of deploying a solution. We're a relatively inexpensive platform, but at the same time, of course, there are costs, administrative costs, and so forth. And so I think it's appropriate for companies to stand up and say, if you're mandating these policies, then you also have to help us meet the cost burden, whether it's the cost of testing or whether the cost of administration and platforms like ours. And we know some of our clients are already being reimbursed for our platform fees from either their insurance companies or from other forms. So I think some of that has started happening, but there certainly needs to be a lot more comprehensive approach on that side. And then obviously on the fine side, we'll see how that works. But I think it's legitimate for companies to be fined if they're not meeting the mandates. But I do think there should be some government assistance and support, to be able to help organizations, meet these mandates.
Ashley Heather, co-founder and president of Cleared For, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
And you can find their website at cleared4.org. About 70% of U.S. adults are fully vaccinated against coronavirus, according to the CDC. There are about, as mentioned earlier, about 70,000 new cases being reported each day, and the death toll is over 750,000 in the U.S. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the infectious disease expert and White House chief science advisor, was questioned today about whether COVID-19 will ever go away entirely.
When you think about pandemics, you're in the pandemic phase, and then you have a deceleration phase, then you have a control phase, then hopefully you'll have elimination and maybe eradication. I think eradication is out. We've only eradicated one virus in history for humans, and that's smallpox. We've eliminated certain infections by very good vaccination programs, such as eliminating polio from the United States, eliminating measles, except for some pockets of under-vaccinated group. So what we're really talking about is control. And control has a wide bracket. You could have it under control where you have enough infections in the community where it isn't a pandemic phase, but it still is interfering with what we would like to get back to, what we used to know as normal. What we hope to get it is at such a low level that even though it isn't completely eliminated, it doesn't have a major impact on public health or on the way we run our lives. We would hope that as we get people more vaccinated, not only in this country, but throughout the world, that the level of viral dynamics will be so low. I can't predict for you today when that will be, because as we see, we now have a situation, we're entering the winter. The good news is we're continuing to come down, and hopefully we'll go further and further down. But what happens globally will impact us. So if we get more people vaccinated globally and more people vaccinated now, hopefully within a reasonable period of time, we will get to that point where it might occasionally be up and down in the background, but it won't dominate us the way it's doing right now.
Dr. Anthony Fauci directs the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, testifying before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. The other witnesses at that hearing included Dr. Rochelle Walensky, CDC Director, Dr. Janet Woodcock, the acting FDA Administrator, and Dawn O'Connell from the Health and Human Services Department, Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. You can find the full hearing archived at our video library, cspan.org. Great Britain is the first country to approve a COVID-19 antiviral pill. It's made by Merck and Ridgeback Biotherapeutics, Reuters calling it potentially game-changing. The pill recommended for people with mild to moderate COVID-19 and at least one risk factor for developing severe illness, like obesity, old age, diabetes, and heart disease. This is Washington Today. Reporting from the Wall Street Journal, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi readied her chamber for a vote on the party's social spending and climate package as early as Thursday, the result of months-long negotiations among Democrats that will evolve further if the measure passes and goes to the Senate. California Democrat told House Democrats in a closed meeting on Thursday that she hoped the House would vote on the bill later that day and then vote on the Senate-passed infrastructure bill on Friday, according to people familiar with her remarks. Progressives have been blocking the roughly $1 trillion infrastructure bill until they were satisfied with the language in the social and climate bill. In public, Speaker Pelosi declined to be specific on timing. Some reporting from the Wall Street Journal. Here's a portion of her news conference Thursday morning.
Could you just project this week a little bit what you expect? Do you expect to vote tonight? And is it possible that you might just vote on the infrastructure bill, considering everybody seems to be bought in and saying it's ready for a vote?
No.
Okay, so let's move on from that. Do you anticipate a vote on Build Back Better today? And what are the big hurdles you have to overcome?
I'll let you know as soon as I wish to. But we're okay, you're just worried about your own schedule. I know that. But the fact is that our members are engaged in very thoughtful deliberation with each other. As I said to you before, 90% of this bill has been agreed to, House, Senate, White House, and written. We made some changes since last week. People need to familiarize themselves with it. That was the purpose of our meeting this morning. As I said, it made me very proud and was inspired by just once again hearing the depth of knowledge and breadth of vision of our colleagues. And we'll let you know. But I think many of you know I was really very unhappy about not passing the BIF last week. I really was very unhappy because we had an October 31st deadline, and I thought that was eloquent, but not enough, I guess. So now we're going to pass both bills, but in order to do so, we have to have votes for both bills, and that's where we are.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi at her news conference. A story at The Hill about the larger social spending bill. They write it's not clear yet if Democratic leaders will be able to round up the votes in their caucus, and some centrists want more time to review the legislative text and wait for a cost analysis from the Congressional Budget Office. The Hill also writes the conservative Club for Growth is rolling out new video ads in 9 congressional districts calling on constituents of key House moderates to ask their members to oppose Democrats' social spending package. Over in the Senate, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, ranking Republican on the Budget Committee, held a news conference talking about what the House Democrats are planning to pass on that larger social spending and tax bill.
When we passed our tax cut bill in 2017 using reconciliation, Republicans held hearings in committees in the Senate. We had markups and people had a chance to weigh in as to what we were doing. in the committee process. We had hearings so the public could understand how the tax cuts worked. None of that has been done. The more you know about the Democratic proposal, the less you would like it. So if I were them, I'd be doing this too, I guess, if you just wanted an outcome. But what's happening in America, and you saw it in Virginia and throughout the country, there's a backlash against this big government liberalism. There's a backlash growing in this country about the state of the economy. Inflation is growing, and the more we spend here in Washington, the more we expand government, the worse that problem is going to be. At the end of the day, people are going to have to be informed meaningfully about what's in these packages. And as of this moment, it's all behind closed doors. We're sort of guessing as what's going to make it. After the elections Tuesday night, Speaker Pelosi added in provisions. She's getting pushed from the left. Everybody's got an opinion about the Tuesday night election. Here's my opinion, that blue states and blue cities are yelling at the left wing of the Democratic Party, "You're nuts, slow down."
Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican, South Carolina on Capitol Hill. We'll have more on the elections and House Speaker Pelosi talking about them later in this program. Another Reuters story, President Joe Biden's $1.75 trillion social policy and climate change legislation would raise less than $1.5 trillion in revenue, the nonpartisan tax experts said on Thursday. But Democrats argued the bill they aim to pass by Thanksgiving is paid for. Speaker Pelosi and Ways and Means Committee Chair Richard Neal said the difference would be made up by provisions intended to enhance the Internal Revenue Service's tax collection and to lower the cost of prescription drugs for the Medicare health care program for the elderly. That from Reuters. Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, has been a pivotal player in these budget talks since all Senate Democrats will, in the end, need to support whatever passes the Senate in that large social spending and tax bill being written by the Democrats. If it is to pass, that's the procedure they're using. He is still expressing some skepticism, though, at many of the programs placed in the latest House Democratic bill, including paid family leave. He was interviewed today on CNN about what it is like negotiating with other lawmakers these days.
You keep on hoping for bipartisanship, but you don't seem to find many partners when you reach across the aisle.
You have to work at it, John. You have to, in today's divided country and divided government that we have and in divided politics that we have, you have to work a little bit harder. How many people did you see on the floor working and talking to both sides? How many times do you see that, John? Look out. Yep. Ask them how many times they've had coffee with each other. Ask them how many know each other's wives or children and what their pleasures are as far as sports or recreation. Why don't we find out who we are? Why don't we talk to each other rather than talking through and over?
Let me
John, let me just tell you this. You want to know what's wrong with the place? I go to work in a hostile working environment every day. If you're a Democrat and a Republican's up for election, you're supposed to be against that person. If Donald Duck's running against that person, you're supposed to give money from your PAC to help the other person beat the person that you've been working with. And even sometimes they'll say, can you come campaign against so-and-so? And then we come back on Monday, and here's the person that we've given money against, and here's the person that we're supposed to give, basically go out and work against, saying, hey, could you sign on this amendment for me? Could you work with me on this amendment? How well do you think that's going to work, John? And I've never done that. If we ever do anything to change this place, there should be an ethics law against us campaigning against each other, against us basically sending money to the candidate, against a sitting colleague. These are people you're working with. You have an obligation and responsibility to get something done. And you can't get something done if you're the enemy on the other side every time there's an election.
I want to ask you about one other moment that did happen on the floor, and it happened after you were talking to McConnell and Thune there. Someone came up to you, we think it was Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia, seemed to point at you and Kyrsten Sinema. It looked a little tense there. No. Okay, what happened there?
Tim Kaine's the most beautiful person. I swear to God, there's not a purer heart than Tim Kaine. Tim comes in and says, Joe, good work on this, on the election bill, on the John Lewis bill. Good work on that. Let's work some more on this, okay? That's with Tim. Good. That was it.
Doesn't sound like a hostile environment as far as Tim Kaine. Not at all. And you were concerned there. Look,
my colleagues have been very, very concerned. They understand, and they know my state, and they know me.
Senator Joe Manchin interviewed Thursday morning on CNN. On Wall Street, the Dow down 33, Nasdaq up 128, S&P up 19. Unemployment insurance claims dropping last week to their lowest level during the coronavirus pandemic, 269,000. That's down 14,000 from the week before, and lowest level since mid-March 2020. Labor Department jobs report for October will come out on Friday. Washington Today continues in a moment.
The weekly podcast is a unique offering from C-SPAN. We tape it right here in the C-SPAN studios in beautiful downtown Capitol Hill. In the town where extremes get all the attention, this isn't more extreme opinion, it's extreme history. From what's new and happening right now, relive the history you know. So listen, follow, and enjoy the C-SPAN podcast, The Weekly. Find it wherever you get podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the new C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Debate continues over the underlying drivers behind Tuesday's election results, in particular why Democrats lost the race for Virginia governor and came very close to losing the contest for New Jersey governor, and how it is or is not connected to President Biden and the congressional Democrats' handling of the infrastructure spending bill and the larger social programs bill. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi gave her take today.
A number of the Virginia Democrats were very critical of the decision not to put the infrastructure bill on the floor before the election, and they say that contributed to Terry McAuliffe's loss. Do you believe the House Democrats in any way were partially responsible for what happened on Tuesday?
Was that a question you asked?
Similar.
What I said was any sign of progress is always good for the public when they understand what it is, and I think they understand infrastructure pretty well. So it would have been better if we had. I don't know, because I haven't seen the data. Perhaps you have. I think there were other issues at work in that election, and it remains not for me to make an observation unsubstantiated by data and science and fact. I'm very scientific about elections, district by district, within the district, region by region, and we'll see what that is. But it was not a good night. So let's just not go away from that. But you have to ask them. If that's what they said, that's your story. I'm not going to comment on their story.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi at her weekly briefing. It turned out to finally be a good night for New Jersey Democrats. This from New Jersey NJ.com. The second night felt a whole lot better than the first, they write. Governor Phil Murphy strode onto a stage in Asbury Park late Wednesday night to raucous cheers from supporters and staffers hours after the Associated Press declared he scored a narrow re-election victory against Republican rival Jack Ciattarelli in a much closer than expected New Jersey governor's race. Democratic governor stood in the same spot nearly 24 hours earlier on election night when the contest was too close to be called. Here is Governor Murphy.
All right. Woo! Yeah. Let's try this again. You know, we just had the most New Jersey experience. I was on my way someplace, and it took us longer to get there than we planned. As a matter of fact, some might say it took 44 years to get here. That's right, I am humbled to be the first Democratic governor re-elected in the great state of New Jersey since my dear friend, the late Governor Brendan Byrne, did this in 1977. Thank you, New Jersey! Thank you for putting your trust in our team for another 4 years. Thank you for saying we need to keep moving forward on our shared journey to a stronger and fairer New Jersey.
Governor Phil Murphy, Democrat, Wednesday night. During that speech, he also acknowledged his very slim margin of victory, promising to represent all New Jersey residents, including those who didn't want him to have a second term.
And if you want to be governor of all of New Jersey, you must listen to all of New Jersey. And New Jersey, I hear you. So tonight, I renew my promise to you, whether you voted for me or not, to work every single day of the next 4 years to keep moving us forward. Forward with renewed optimism to ensure greater opportunities for all 9.3 million who call the Garden State their home. And so importantly, forward with a deeper sense of fairness and a commitment to equity. Forward by rejecting the divisiveness and chaos that permeate too much of our politics. In short, forward living up to our Jersey values.
Governor Phil Murphy late Wednesday in Asbury Park, New Jersey. The campaign of his opponent, Republican Jack Ciattarelli, putting out a statement Wednesday night that reads, with the candidates separated by a fraction of a percent out of 2.4 million ballots cast, it's irresponsible of the media to make this call when the New Jersey Secretary of State doesn't even know how many ballots are left to be counted. In Virginia, at the governor's mansion in the capital city, Richmond, Governor Ralph Northam, a Democrat, meeting with the governor-elect, Glenn Youngkin, Republican. Youngkin is fresh off his victory on Tuesday over Democrat Terry McAuliffe. Northam and Youngkin speaking outside the mansion to reporters about the upcoming transition of power.
I just speak on behalf of Pam and me. This has been a tremendous privilege. We look forward to Mr. Youngkin and his wife taking over and continuing on a lot of the good progress that we made. So as far as welcoming you, Glenn and Suzanne, I have, and I'm sure you've seen these before, but I have some challenge coins. And this is my challenge coin that has a picture of the mansion on the front and then the Virginia seal on the back. So I would like you to have this as our symbol of just welcoming you to your new home. Yeah. And Pam had something for you.
Tiny flowers. Thank you.
Yes, and please welcome our governor-elect to be the 74th governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Mr. Glenn Youngkin. Welcome, Glenn.
Governor, thank
yes,
you
sir.
very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. And we just had a lovely lunch. I can't describe it any other way. And to be welcomed with such grace into this home is incredibly humbling for Suzanne and me. I'm a homegrown Virginian, and to have a moment to stand here in front of this historic building and to stand here and think about all of the many, many important decisions that have been made here and the many people who have passed through these doors, it's a bit humbling for us to be here today. The governor and First Lady and Suzanne and I had an amazing lunch. I think we should actually thank the kitchen team too. They were amazing, the chef and everyone who prepared it. But it also gave us a chance to talk about our transition. And I just want to thank you for the incredibly cooperative way that you've, of course, expressed you're going to help us. It's important. We got a lot of work to do. Day one's going to come fast. And on day one, we need to go to work. And so I just so appreciate your willingness to be so helpful as we head towards this next stage in Virginia's future. And then finally, and I do so appreciate your welcoming of the press team here, we're going to continue to be incredibly open and accessible. And I think one of the things that has excited me most during this campaign, but also as we head forward, is just the open interaction that we have. And we're going to have a lot to talk about because we're going to be moving forward with a real pace. But I appreciate everybody being here today. And Suzanne and I look so forward to serving all Virginians. And we just appreciate the opportunity this afternoon to get started in this way.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
What stood
Thanks,
out
everybody.
to you in your meeting, Governor-elect?
Thank you.
What stood out to you in your meeting?
Excuse me?
What stood out to you in your meeting, sir?
Today was the beginning of a friendship, and I appreciate that. And I think that what's most important in a moment like this is to actually have someone who you can call and ask questions. And so I just appreciated that entire sentiment today. It's also really fun, as the governor said, that we share one very important moment, and that is we both married up in a big way. And the good thing is that we both acknowledge it and recognize it. And that's going to be a great way for us to develop a future friendship as well. So thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Virginia Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin and Virginia Governor Ralph Northam and their spouses outside the governor's mansion in the capital city, Richmond. Associated Press, by the way, reporting that lunch included beef tenderloin, butternut and pumpkin soup, and pumpkin pie. Glenn Youngkin will be sworn in as governor on January 15th. Former President Donald Trump's effort to keep the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol from getting his White House records went before a federal judge today. The claim, executive privilege. Politico's Congress reporter Kyle Cheney has been following the court hearing. He joins us now. What happened?
Well, what we saw for over 2 hours was a federal judge essentially pick apart Donald Trump's effort to try to stop the committee from getting his records. She was very skeptical of the arguments he put forward, suggesting that somehow as a former president he has the ability to assert privilege over his White House's records when the current president, Joe Biden, has decided not to do that. It's a fairly unprecedented case, but the judge made clear that she does not think that President Trump has a lot of legal ground to stand on.
What records is the Select Committee looking for?
Well, we learned helpfully in some of their filings that these are very sensitive records. They're culled from the files of former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, former White House counsel Patrick Philbin, and his advisor Stephen Miller, and other very close aides to Donald Trump. And they pertain to Congress's investigation of the January 6th attack on the Capitol and Donald Trump's efforts to try to overturn the election results. So the National Archives, which houses these records, has described them in its filings and said they are relevant to the committee's investigation. We don't know what's in them, but we know that there could be highly sensitive materials in there that the committee would find of great value, and that's why they're fighting this in court.
Did the federal judge indicate today when she might rule?
Her only word was expeditiously, and we kind of have a general timeline because the National Archives wants to release these records under Joe Biden's permission by November 12th, which is next week. And so without the court intervening, that's what would happen. So that's why Trump filed his suit and wants a quick ruling because he presumably if he won, he could stop that from happening. But if he loses, next week is the big deadline for that.
If the former president loses, there's no appeal possible?
So that's the big X factor here is he would obviously have appeal rights, and the question is, would an appeals court intervene to stay the effect of whatever the judge, assuming the committee wins here? The appeals court could step in and say, well, we want to look at this too, and we're going to hold off the effect of the judge's ruling until we look at it, and then you can go to the Supreme Court after that. The question is, do they see any legal merit to Trump's claim where this judge apparently did not today?
We're talking with Kyle Cheney from Politico. You have a related article about how many interviews the January 6th attack select committee has done. What did you find?
So this is interesting. It's been a bit of a black box. They have not told us too much publicly about where they're at. We learned today that they've done 150 witness interviews, and that's the extent of it. We don't know a whole lot of detail about who those interviews were with or how significant the information they learned was. But 150 is a big number, and we've only really gotten an inkling that about a handful of them publicly so far. So they're getting a pretty big volume of material. Still a lot of unknowns there, but a much more sprawling inquiry than we've understood so far.
Kyle Cheney covers Congress for Politico. Read his stories at Politico.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
A real estate agent in Texas, Jenna Ryan, has been sentenced today to 2 months in jail for her participation in the January 6th riot. U.S. District Judge pointing out that Ryan did interviews and posted on Twitter afterwards defending her actions and bragging that as a blonde white woman, she would not be going to jail. The judge today saying, for better or worse, you become one of the faces of January 6th, and that how she is sentenced would be an indication to the world about how the U.S. is responding to this incident. Also today, a Russian analyst who contributed to a dossier of democratically funded research into ties between Russia and Donald Trump has been indicted on charges of lying to the FBI about his sources of information. Igor Dachenko, part of the special counsel John Durham's investigation into the origins of the FBI's probe into whether Trump's 2016 presidential campaign coordinated with Russia. This from AFP. The United States will devote funding to help journalists overseas survive frivolous lawsuits meant to silence them, USAID Chief Samantha Power announced Thursday. In a wide-ranging speech, the U.S. Agency for International Development Administrator also promised to increase sharply how much American aid is channeled to local groups, vowing to make such assistance more inclusive and effective. They're reporting from AFP. Power spoke at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., as USAID this week marks 60 years since the agency was created by executive order by President John F. Kennedy.
They've been saying for decades that what happens abroad matters at home. And though people understand that rationally and have for some time, today it isn't just an intellectual argument. It is a felt, lived experience. It is losing our friends and loved ones, our grandparents and colleagues, to a disease that originated halfway around the world and forever altered the global economy. It is almost 3 centuries of carbon pollution leading to storms that flood our streets and subways, fires that darken our skies, deep freezes that break our pipes, and droughts that turn our farmlands to dust. It is oligarchs who raise our housing costs by buying up properties with laundered money, foreign hackers who infect our computers with ransomware, and autocrats who try to manipulate our elections and spread disinformation to sow division in our society. But we must do more than simply argue the importance of international development to our lives here at home. We also must work to change international development. As John F. Kennedy said, we can't leave it up to the experts and the diplomats. We must offer people not a vision merely of international development, but a vision of inclusive development. I mean that in 3 ways. First, we have to broaden our coalition to allow people from more diverse backgrounds and partners of all kinds to participate in this development mission. We must make aid more accessible, in other words. Second, we must shift our thinking to be more focused on the voices and needs of the most marginalized. We must make aid more equitable. And third, in confronting some of the biggest challenges of our time, COVID-19, climate change, growing authoritarianism, we must listen to what our partners in the countries where we work are asking of us. We must make aid more responsive. These are the changes that I will prioritize during my tenure at USaid.
Samantha Power is the administrator of USaid, the U.S. Agency for International Development, speaking today at Georgetown University. Notice that the State Department website says that on December 9th and 10th of this year, President Biden will be hosting the first of 2 summits for democracy, which will bring together leaders from government, civil society, and the private sector to set forth an affirmative agenda for democratic renewal and to tackle the greatest threats faced by democracies today through collective action. Thanks for listening today to Washington Today, and for more top Washington stories, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word. Go to c-span.org/connect. And I hope you have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we're taking your calls live, on the air, on the news of the day. And we'll discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Friday morning, we'll discuss the latest on President Biden's Build Back Better agenda and upcoming fiscal deadlines with Illinois Democratic Congressman Brad Schneider and Pennsylvania Republican Congressman Lloyd Smucker. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Friday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our new mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, text messages, and tweets.